Video, we're going to talk through what's going on in society right now in terms of the workplace. So some people are getting laid off from jobs, but some people are also dealing with a crisis of consciousness. I've mentioned to you, I've worked in the finance industry. If you are new to the channel, I've worked at places like Goldman's, Morgan Stanley and other investment banks for over 10 years. And here we have a neurosurgeon who also worked in the medical industry for over 10 years or more, right? Now, what we see time and time again is people are figuring out the system is kind of rigged. It's kind of rigged against most people. It's really rigged against the people who are working there. And it's really part of this whole fake dynamic that people have kind of had enough of. You've probably heard of the term Great Awakening and things like that. Now, in this example, we have someone who worked as a neurosurgeon and he realized how big pharma, big medical companies, and the entire medical infrastructure, like the finance infrastructure and other industries, are kind of rigged. And he's going to cover this in this video. And what's quite interesting is he released a video about 4 weeks ago and he has 10 million views. And neurosurgeons typically can get paid from, 200, 300K a year to 500K a year, which is a significant amount of money he's walked away from to kind of live a minimalist life.
I became a doctor to help people. And I remember at the beginning of medical school, when I was just starting, there was a ceremony and we all took a Hippocratic oath. And I remember there was one of the older faculty docs, and he said that your job as doctors is to relieve suffering. It's not to do a surgery or give a pill. It's to relieve suffering. That might be from doing a surgery or a pill, but it might be just listening, acknowledging what someone's going through. That stuck with me all through medical school and residency and afterwards. How I became a neurosurgeon is I've always been interested in how the brain works, how consciousness works, how our brain and body is able to perceive this mountainside, the stream that's nearby.
So what we have right at the start is he has quite a genuine story that starts with, he was a doctor, he was training to become a doctor because he wanted to help people, the same way I kind of went into the finance industry to help have good regulation, financial regulation after the global financial crisis in 2008. Around that time is when I was about to go to university. I studied about economics, and you even at that age, I could figure out things weren't quite right in the finance industry. I remember in 2013, so over a decade ago, I was working for a major investment bank. I won't name the actual one right now, but I was really pro crypto and I was trying to explain how it works and how it could have a positive impact. And the CEO of the company, what was he focused on at that time? It wasn't crypto. It was financial regulation, things like that. This bank, like most banks, was getting fined quite heavily for breaking rules, right? What was he focused on? Not for 1 month, but for several months around that time. It was the rainbow community, right? LGB type of things, right? And he would go on about it for months and months. It wasn't just a 1 month thing. It was like 6 months to a year. All I heard from the CEO of the major investment bank. And when I discussed crypto with other people, they just thought it was a scam. They didn't really understand it. And these were people more senior than me. And it really bothered me at that point that I was like, either I'm wrong or they're wrong, right? And typically, if you're going into your finance career or a new industry, after just studying university and coming out and having a few ideas, people will think you're a bit you don't know what you're talking about. And you tend to rely on people who have, 10, 20, 30 years experience in the finance industry, like they know what they're talking about. But actually they don't. Most people are normies, they're NPCs, they follow whatever the trend is, whatever the mainstream media approved narrative is. In this case, it'd be like saying, crypto is bad, it's a scam. And what you realize about these major investment banks, they won't back anything unless the establishment is backing it. So they'll probably back CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, but they see crypto as a scam because it's more pro-freedom. And this system is against anything that is pro your freedom. They're for anything that's going to restrict your freedom, lie to you, restrict your ability to grow. They want you to be a slave to the system. So now when the system says something is a bad idea, they don't really talk about it, typically because it's a good thing for you to be aware of. And what this system does, and this is why it's important to look at things objectively and take a step back from your workplace or from any industry you're in and try to understand it. Like one thing I realized about finance, which is probably similar to medical and the mainstream media industry, is they use a technique called compartmentalization, which means they create small compartments in the company. And you think, these departments are there to organize things effectively, which is part of it. But within each department, you have subsections. What it's to do is to stop the flow of information. So you can't look at things and really understand how things are working. Most obvious case would be when it comes to layoffs. You know, if you're really taking a step back from your workplace and analyzing how things are moving, you can see the layoffs are coming. You can see a team's going to be growing. You can see certain changes, but they don't want that flow of information. They want to put you out on the back foot when it comes to information of how the system works. So they're always going to, you know, put you in one small pigeonhole. They're going to give you a very small part of the company that you're aware of, and you know a little bit about other things. But once you learn how the whole thing works, you can see what the scam is. You can see what loopholes you can exploit, and that's what you need to understand, right? And you need to understand how it's kind of a one big scam and how you can maneuver through that scam. So we're going to learn more from him and his experience and him kind of waking up to the lies in the medical industry and how he decided to essentially quit a job where he's probably earning 200 to 500K a year.
But something was not right. I was very unhappy. On the surface, it didn't make sense. I was getting paid very well. It was a very well-respected job. I had good colleagues, had good support, but I was the most unhappy that I've ever been, and I couldn't really figure it out for a long time. I had gotten married before getting the new job, and that's the best decision I've ever made. My wife is so understanding and supportive. She tried to help me out, but really I didn't know what was the problem. I couldn't describe it, but you know, now I know what it is. So
what he goes into here is explaining how, you know, most times you're studying hard at university, you get into a prestigious job, maybe your first or second job, and you realize something doesn't feel right? Even when you have the money, the social status. You know, I'm from ethnically an Asian background from South Asia in India, but I spent my whole life in the UK. And this guy's Asian, I'm not sure from which country, but typically in those type of cultures, the whole thing is about studying hard, getting a good education, and then getting a job that pays well, but also it comes with some social status because it's kind of a social status driven culture, I would say within Asian culture, but also in the West in general, right? And then what ends up happening is you figure out something isn't right, and then you might speak about it with colleagues, but they think you're kind of a bit crazy or you just don't get it. This is just how the system is. You just got to play along with it, even if you don't feel fulfilled and you feel like something isn't quite right about how the company or the industry is operating. And then that's how it typically starts for a lot of people. When they realize that and they can't share this, or they're called crazy, they're gaslighted by other people for pointing out these issues, they typically start to fill that void life with some type of substance. They might start drinking or smoking something, or they get caught up in these passive aggressive social status games because they're looking for meaning in their life. They end up essentially competing with other people to buy a bigger house, to buy a nicer car, the newest phone, a more expensive watch, and they get caught up in this popularity contest. And this is something I've seen quite frequently in the finance industry, but I'm sure it includes the medical industry too, and tech and things like that, where they might not be in the office, for example, a doctor, but they might buy an overpriced house with a large mortgage, and the mortgage becomes a kind of slave mechanism for them because they're tied into that mortgage, or they're tied into an expensive car payment to pay for an expensive car that is the most expensive car they can buy, right? So it's really about thinking things through clearly for yourself and your long-term life goals if you're focused on your career or your financial freedom. Because this guy, as he covers throughout the video, he is much more happier living a low-cost minimalist lifestyle in the mountains, surrounded by nature, not spending a lot of money. And he's currently unemployed, but I'm sure he's saved up significant amounts of money from his job. But he's, from what it sounds like, he wants to go into more of a low stress, maybe lower pay type of role where he can spend more time in nature. And I think that's an important point for everyone out there. It's like, if you're set up in a system where everything is kind of overpriced, particularly maybe buying a house or having a family and things like that, you should think, okay, well, this is not ideal. You can obviously aim to make as much money as possible, but how can you build a lifestyle that you actually want to enjoy rather than putting off your life thinking, oh, when you hit, 10 years from now, you buy a house. By the time you save up enough money to buy that house, it's probably going to be a lot more expensive because of inflation and things like that. So always kind of pace yourself in a way where you're building a life you want to enjoy and it's more independent of the system, which is what he's trying to do. He's kind of taken a major step back from someone who had a prominent role in the system of playing along with this kind of charade of big pharma.
So that was my aha moment. It's like, oh, I know what's going on. Wait, to actually heal, you need to eat a certain way, sleep a lot, not be stressed out, have a good social network, exercise, move your body, stretch. If you do all those things, you heal. And when your body heals, it doesn't just heal worn out joint in your neck or your back. It heals everything. It heals the worn out joint in your neck, your back. It heals the skin problem. It heals your digestive tract problem. It heals your hair issues. When your body heals, it heals everything. And that actually became a huge problem. And let me explain why that's a huge problem. Because most people will say, wait, how's that a problem that you figured out how people are healing? It's a problem because our medical system isn't set up this way. I'm not knocking any hospital.
So it goes to show how this system is kind of rigged against you. He says the basic things that are good for your health, which are quite obvious, diet, sleep, low stress, exercise, community. Everything this system is rigged against, right? Let's go through that. So community, this system is deliberately designed to destroy the family structure, destroy community bonds. People are so busy, they don't have time to socialize. Even if they do, if you're a man, you could get falsely accused of things. If you have the wrong opinion, you could get cancelled. When it comes to exercise, obviously you can make time for that, but you're living quite a high stress lifestyle, particularly if you're working in an office, particularly if you're working long work hours to pay the bills. So you might not have as much time as you'd like to spend time exercising. When it comes to diet, and almost anything you buy outside, apart from maybe fresh fruit or veg or some types of meat and things like that, loads of food is full of negative chemicals like seed oils and things like that. Getting a healthy meal is either overpriced or they make it deliberately inconvenient to get, because this system sees you like a battery in the Matrix. You probably might remember the Matrix movie where each human being is like plugged into the Matrix, and this system uses you up like a Duracell battery. So this is how you got to see it. As this system would prefer you to be unhealthy, because then they can give you medication or operations. You're seen as a useful commodity to make sick, so they can exploit more money out of you, right? And then in terms of sleep, I think many people are kind of struggling with sleep in a sense, because they're stressed out about their finances, or they're stressed out about their career, their job stability, social instability, as you can see in the UK and other places right now. So it's like this system is deliberately creating a set of circumstances that is against your best interests. So let's continue to learn more from him here.
And grow economically. And the problem there is that if you figure out a way to help patients heal, and that way doesn't include a pill or a surgery, well, then the hospital and the doctor are in big trouble. Because if you figure out a way to help people heal and you can't charge them for it, well, then you've just worked yourself out of a job.
This is so real, right? Most industries, about 80% of it is quite inefficient and is kind of not needed. If you have people with good life practices and a system that's actually pro-human rather than anti-human, right? So he mentioned here, if you don't take advantage of people and you don't exploit them, you help them heal without, chemicals and things like that, drugs or surgeries that they could avoid through good lifestyle practices. If you help people heal through good lifestyle practices and you're not exploiting them, then you kind of don't need this bloated banking industry or this bloated medical industry or the mainstream media, because if they're not lying to you, if they're kind of giving you a version of truth with some of their opinion, then you don't really need that type of bloated industry, right? What this system does is it deliberately creates problems because it can profit from those problems, even as it goes as far as exploiting your health and giving you medication that are kind of not good for your health, right? Because everything in society, and this is why you see part of the reason for the layoffs and things like that, is that everything's based on transactional relationships. Everything's like, how can I use this person? How can I exploit them? Whether it's lying to them about what would be a good financial investment and then exploiting them through that, getting them to invest in something that's quite risky. And if they make a loss, then they might need to make more investments, or whether it's exploiting someone through giving them education that isn't the best for them. It's all about how can I use this person to further my agenda. This isn't really a community or ethically based society, even if you include the medical industry where they have all these rules about ethics and taking an oath to look out for the patients, things like that. And it's the same thing when it comes to job promotions at your job. You might have to step on people to succeed. When it comes to central banks printing money out of thin air, printing money, which is what the central banks are doing, and that's creating the inflation, not any of the other reasons they say, like Russia and things like that, right? So when they do stuff like that, the system is based around creating problems to create profit by exploiting you, right? So, as I say, the system, what you see right now, the system is running a lot of scams on you, but the scams are becoming so intense, so obvious, the lying is so obvious that it's hard for anyone to pretend like that isn't the case. And that's why you see a lot of people waking up. You can call it the Great Awakening or however you'd like to describe it.
And so I still did surgery, But I really felt like the focus of medicine wasn't in the right place. It wasn't in healing, it was in making money from surgeries and pills and images.
It's the same as like the education system where you go to university and you study hard, but then you have massive student loans, and the jobs typically, the salary of the jobs you go into don't necessarily pay off in terms of the student loans that you have to pay, which are quite high. And all the incentives in the system are about exploiting people, as I say, as he mentioned here, about how people are treated in the medical industry. Now, when I was working at Goldman Sachs, as I mentioned before, I wasn't working in this particular department, but I was aware of this report. It says Goldman Sachs asks in its biotech investing research report, is curing patients a sustainable business model? So what it's basically doing is saying to all medical industry investments, is kind of advising on medical industry investments through doing a research. It's basically saying, curing people of illness is not a good idea. It doesn't make as much money as people being sick and treating them, right? Why find a cure to cancer when you can just put them on medication for the rest of their life and make money from that? Why cure people with any major health issue? This is how evil the system is. It will create problems through putting negative, chemicals and things like this in the food, the pesticides and so on, the certain pollution in the air and other things. And then so at the front end, it'll exploit you through that way. Then at the back end, towards your later stage of life, if you develop health issues, it'll try to exploit it by not curing your issues, by treating the issues that they themselves created in you. This is how evil the system kind of is.
And that tore me apart. I gained 40 pounds. I was really sad, I was really angry.
So this is what happens, and this is what I mentioned earlier in the video about the bad habits that people can develop. When you're spending during the day doing a job you hate, even if it pays well, which I'm sure he was getting paid quite a lot of money as a neurosurgeon, you end up developing some bad habits. Some people it might be alcohol or smoking, things like that, but for him it was, not taking care of his health and becoming overweight. Now, this moral dilemma you're dealing with is going to have an impact on you. There is some kind of karma type of consequences on you of having bad, an ethically immoral system. And I think that's a lot of what you see in society, where people are unhappy with their work, seeing through the lies, but they're not sure how to escape it. And one way you can escape it is through radically downsizing your life, which he has done through living in a low-cost location.
Yeah, it tore me up inside. And I knew that if I kept going back to that job every day for another 20 years, I would die before 20 years. My body and mind and soul, they would have just broken down, and I don't think I would have made it. I wouldn't have made it to 60. So I knew that something had to change, but I was stuck. I was the breadwinner, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. I think a lot of people may feel this way. I knew that I was dying. I was dying inside, and my body was dying.
So what can we learn from him here, right? So if you have a soulless job and you're the main breadwinner, you need to find a different solution because people are dependent on you, right? And I think that's the reality. A lot of people out there, they don't mind working hard right now, but they're like, I can't do this for the next several decades. I can't be, lots of people feel like they're not going to make it to 60, make it to retirement age, working at the pace they're working in, doing a particular type of work that they don't find fulfilling. And that's why, as I say, you need to find an alternative exit from this system, however that would be. A career break, and I recommend everyone out there, you don't wait until your retirement to take a career break. Try to take career breaks in between your working career. I know that might not look good on your CV. They might say, why do you take a year off between one job and the next? It depends on your circumstances, and it's something I can advise on through career coaching if you're interested. If you take a career break, maybe every 5 to 10 years for a year or so, you could do that on your savings, maybe live in a low cost of living location, really rethink your life. And what I mean by that is you need time to reflect. You can't wait until you're at retirement age 60, 70 to reflect on your life. I think every, couple years you should maybe take, even if it's a 6-month break, and travel, and it doesn't have to be the most expensive trip, just to really rethink what direction you're taking your life in, because you dedicate so much of your life to companies that really couldn't care less about you. And in this case, he's taking a bit of a career break to rethink what he wants to do. Maybe there's alternative areas of medicine in the medicine industry he can participate in where it's more aligned with his ethics and he's not taking advantage of people. And the thing is, most co-workers that you work with, they simply won't understand why you're quitting because they're so caught up in the rat race. They might be other doctors, or other people in the finance industry, and they're paying for their overpriced house. They're paying a high cost of living cost. They're paying for mortgage costs, their car payment, things like that. They're living beyond their means because they're stressed out to make for those payments. And I've worked with many people like managing directors in the finance industry, things like that. And what they do is they would always be living beyond their means. Even people you would think would be very rich, right? Who might be earning, $600,000 to $1 million a year. They would always be buying houses that are way beyond their earning potential right now. And they would be stressed out, losing their hair, or their wife would be complaining about things he needs to buy for them, interior design that she wants to pursue, clothes she wants to buy, things like that. They were always like caught up on this pedestal. And the way I'd see it is, if you're earning a high salary, even though you've got to play that social status game to fit in within the other people, you should kind of try to exit that strategy as much as you can. But it's not sustainable the way we're currently living as a society, as a system, and a lot of these high paying jobs. So it's kind of good he's decided to step back now rather than later, where he would be in a lot more debt, maybe through having multiple properties, multiple cars he can't really afford. And then if he did lose his job, then he'd really be in a bad position. So it's good he downsized his life now. And there's something I do recommend in my videos, as difficult as it might be. If you can downsize your life in any way, that's worthwhile doing. And don't worry about co-workers that will see you as seeing you as dropping out of the social status game, the passive aggressive pursuit of social status. Don't worry about people judging you for that, because at the end of the day, you want to quit the rat race. You don't want to get caught up in the rat race, climbing the corporate ladder, which doesn't necessarily pay off. And then this is kind of the lifestyle he's living isn't too dissimilar from a life that I want, and I'm kind of working on getting there. Is spending more of a quiet life in nature, spending time doing some other hobbies like martial arts and things like that interest me. And the point I'm trying to explain is that you should kind of pursue what you want, and the society and this economy is just collapsing one way or another. That's the way I see it. We might go like, oh, maybe a politician will save things and make things better temporarily, but it's not a permanent solution. So if you kind of, rather than get caught up in a losing battle of try to save this society, save things, kind of save yourself. And in this case, he did save himself. I'm sure he's got a lot of money in the bank right now, and he's spending very little just on food and probably his lodging of a small house near the countryside. So that's a good approach to take. And you can always go back to work after. If you really don't like this type of life, if it's really too quiet, too boring, you can maybe get an easier job. You can go back to your high stress, high pay job if that's what you want. But it's worthwhile taking some time to consider the alternative rather than just thinking there's only one way to live, and that's a high stress, high pay job.
So I think that's what most people call a midlife crisis. Is what I would say was those 9 years I was really unhappy. I knew something was wrong, and I knew I couldn't live like that, but I felt stuck in that situation, felt like I couldn't escape it. That was a crisis. Now that I've left, I haven't been this happy in my whole life. It does not feel like a crisis right now. And maybe financially it might be a crisis at some point, but I've never been this happy before, ever. It feels right. So what I did when I quit is I just walked a lot outside, because I had gained 40 pounds, like I said earlier, and I ate healthy. I slept a lot. Because a neurosurgeon, they don't sleep very well because they keep getting called about emergencies. Nobody was calling me. I slept every night for a really long time. And I walked, and I spent time outside, I spent time with my dog. I did the things that I wanted to do, which is be out here. My dog, she's Doobie, she's 7 years old, and for the majority of her life, she unfortunately had a very boring life, because I was...
So it's just put simply here, he had like a midlife crisis, and a lot of people are having this type of midlife crisis. They're waking up to the rig system, particularly if they don't really have those kind of key markers of life, which would be maybe a healthy relationship or marriage and kids. They're waking up to the rig system. Why they're working so hard? I think many men are waking up to this and thinking, why are they working so hard, right? I'd rather be happy with more savings, with less material items, more of my free time, spending time walking with his dog, as he mentioned, or spending time with your family, whoever that may be. If it's not a wife, maybe family members. He mentioned spending time with his pets, his dogs, and things like that. And this is a more fulfilling life than being a high status, high profile doctor, or a lawyer, or an investment banker, things like that. So it's worthwhile considering if you are caught up in that stress right now. Maybe you're watching this video after a hard day of work. It's worthwhile reconsidering your life from this perspective.
Where I'm going with this is quit. I quit. I had no plan. But when you let go of something that you're holding too tightly, even though it's hurting you, when you let go of it, then you're able to pick up something else. Hopefully it's better for you. I wanted to spend time outside.
So this is the key point there, right? Just a small point there, that sometimes quitting with no plan, with no future, is better than the status quo. You might think your safest option is to continue with what you're doing, but sometimes it does make sense to be like, okay, let me quit. I suggest you have your savings in place and your investments and things like that. But then if you quit and then you have an alternative plan on an alternative route for yourself, sometimes that is better than just being part of the status quo and just sticking with that safe job. Because as we know now, no jobs are safe. No, even those high paying jobs, those kind of important finance or tech jobs, they're not really safe, right? And through my career advice service, there's a link in description. I can help talk you through how to deal with that instance, because that's something I have done myself, which would be like quitting a relatively high paying job, things like that in maybe a major investment bank. Those are interesting considerations you need to make quite carefully and be guided through quite effectively. Now, if we look at this interesting comment that was on this video, it says, I am a software engineer and I've been traveling the world for 10 years. I've been to 75 countries and I can clearly say that since the system you are in is based on money, things are being done without considering human life. Not only in the health sector, but in all sectors. However, you were able to realize and speak about this because you are at a certain level of education, have improved yourself, and most importantly, are a good person. Those who work in other sectors remain silent, are either uneducated or bad people. Thank you for telling the truth. You can be happy now. So you have three industries. I've worked in the finance industry and I've covered in many of my videos how fake it is. He's worked in the medical industry, the guy we were just watching, and now you have a software engineer on your screen right now saying the exact same thing. These are all kind of high paying, high status jobs that are telling you how fake it is, how much of lies and manipulation it is, how it's exploiting you. So the whole point here is, if you're working a job and it feels pointless, it feels like you're unappreciated, that you're taking advantage of people, you're not comfortable, kind of exploiting people in that way, it's based on manipulation, creating problems, not solutions, then you should really think about how you're living your life and how you can live it in a more sustainable way that aligns with your beliefs. And if that means downsizing in terms of your material life, then that could be an option that you should consider. Now that leads me to my career advice service, which there's a link in the description. I can talk you through some of these difficult circumstances. I've worked with clients who are across the finance, tech, and medical industry and a few other industries too. So if you're in that situation and you want to plan ahead, feel free to reach out to me at the link in the description. There are 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.